the jewelry box is strictly just adornment. I have a background in jewelry making, and so this was me taking myself out the contemporary art jewelry field and strictly placing myself in sculpture. I have a deep affinity for making jewelry. I am a jeweler. I just don't like to participate in the contemporary art jewelry field per se. It hasn't been the most welcoming experience, and so this is me creating my own lane, but still double dutching in the contemporary art jewelry field, and then sculpture as well. As far as the other themes of community and things, I don't necessarily think that I think about community so much when I think about making these large works, but I do think about it in the sense of how people feel when so many people assemble into the space. And so that form of community is something that, I have seen and is definitely welcomed. So definitely identity with a strong background in jewelry making, and then having the 80s hip-hop jewelry be heavily influenced in my art practice. It's all about identity, actually. Rappers would create these pendants that they would all wear as a crew, so to identify what set that they are a part of. And so also within the lines of jewelry making, I make one-of-a-kind pieces, and so it's specific. A lot of these pieces that you're going to see in Jewelry Box are specific to me and designs that I've created specifically for my body. Some of them have been sold off of my body because I really don't sell jewelry at this point of my practice. So definitely this is a reflection of me and my influences, not necessarily a direct depiction of 80s hip-hop jewelry, but I am definitely taking the weight and the larger-than-life aspects of that type of genre of jewelry and exploding it and putting it into a space. Well, the biggest influence into how I got exposed to jewelry would be my parents. My father, for one, who would get custom jewelry made all the time, and I would accompany him going into these jewelry stores that would be in a huge commercial building, essentially, and there would be floors of jewelers. And so all rooms all connected to each other. But you have tons of mirrors, you have tons of gold jewelry, big rope chains, and diamonds, of course. And so, just thinking about scale as a child, to just be immersed into something like that, I wanted to create my own. And then also, I would have to say my mom is a huge influence because she made me go to all-girls Catholic high school where I learned how to pick up a torch for the first time. And so that influence alone, I couldn't shake it. Even studying biology, as soon as I got that degree, I had to go back to art. The fire and the metal called me. And so it's like, okay, so what do I do with this? I didn't want to be a commercial jeweler. I didn't want to make the things that were inspiring me out of the hip-hop jewelry or the era of Jacob the Jeweler, where you see majority of these huge three-dimensional necklaces that are life-size. I felt like more could be done. And being that I come from more of a fabrication background than a commercial jeweler background, I think it's interesting to try to merge both of those ideas. And so I think all of those influences are what you see in the space. I learned how to weld on the bracelet that's sitting behind me. And it was the first time that I started to think about scale outside of the body. And what enamored me about this particular design, because I made it small for myself, wearable out of wood, I liked every time I took the bracelet off and I placed it on the table, it was a different orientation. And so I'm like, okay, like this is what I like about the piece. Now I'm wondering if I can increase the scale and see if my colleagues, because I made it when it was my first year at Cranbrook Academy of Art, so I was wondering if my colleagues would help and assist and think that this is an interactive piece for me. And so they didn't. They respected it as sculpture. The only interaction that I got out of my colleagues is when they helped me move the piece from the wood shop to the location for the critique. And, but it was successful in the sense that every time I've exhibited this piece, it's been different when it's been in the public realm. Viewers become active participants and try to conquer the sculpture, so it doesn't look the same either. So this piece, I even got my first welding and grinding scars. So it's a piece that, I don't know, I might keep for myself, unless these institutions want to come and make it rain on me. But it's definitely a sentimental piece in regarding the scale that I am achieving. The Fulani earrings, they're the newest piece to the collection. And I've been obsessed with Fulani earrings probably since looking at National Geographics. And my mom I have all of them, let's just say. So just National Geographic's Coming to America, where you see the Fulani being prominent on some of the dancers, but I've always been totally obsessed with these huge gold forms that these women carry around on them. They're a nomadic tribe, the Fulani, and they're basically the most elaborate symbol of wealth that you can receive from your husband. And so it's basically the woman is carrying the status. Even though the man might have, her husband, all these goats and all these things, it's literally how she is adorned. And so that's been something that has been really specific to my practice too, is, investigating the hierarchy of materials and going through different tribes and thinking about the diaspora and what was the symbol of wealth. And so my first graduate studies class, this is prior to my attendance to Cranbrook Academy of Art, I had to make a piece that was from this African art studies class. And so I had to make something in my field. So I was a metalsmith. And so I chose the Fulani earring. And so this had to be, 2008 or 9 that I was first trying to attempt the form. And so I was making it out of copper and soldering it. It was still at a wearable scale. And so it was successful in a sense, but it wasn't true to the form. And so I think me coming back at it, welding, thinking about scales, and holding this piece inside for so long, it was just nice to be able to get it out and finally achieve it in the way that it is intended to look, even though I'm not making it all forged out of one piece of gold. I think I achieved a very successful look of the same historic, iconic design of the Fulani. Basically, I want to come for Sir Anish Kapoor. Or even, the Marc de Souvreau's, the Richard Serra's, like that scale, like I'm coming. And so I would love for these Fulani earrings to be large enough to where you can walk underneath them. I even have bracelet designs where you can walk through them as well. So it's just, they have their own visual language, but I think it's time for some other visual language to come up. The history behind the rings is that I started making them when I was teaching my first metalsmithing class in a community college close to Detroit. And it was a way for me to show my students how objects can have relationships with each other and you're not repeating the same thing. That was one of the things that I've never wanted to do, was be an artist that was a one-trick pony. We see how galleries move artists' work and pigeonhole them into a certain style, and I'm just like, damn, like y'all don't think about nothing else. And it's not that they don't think about anything else. It's literally how people who are working with them or managing them, or the institutions that are making them go in this one direction. So I never wanted to do that, and I think that's highly reflective of my art practice. I don't want to have the same conversation over and over again, and I know that there's many people in the world who probably haven't heard that conversation, but the shit gets old to me. And so if I'm not excited, how, are you excited, or the viewer being excited? So that's just something that I think about. So just back to the rings, I didn't want my students to just make production. You're not learning production jewelry when you're taking a metalsmithing classes in undergrad. You're learning how to fabricate. You're working with sheet metal primarily. And so all of the rings that you see I made in brass for myself. The majority of them were happening in class. So we would meet like twice a week and have 3-hour class. I would teach. I would work on my rings. I would help instruct, my students as well, so they can see that I'm actually making the thing too. This is another thing. Sometimes you don't get to see your professors doing the thing that they're known for doing. So that was important for me as well. And so I just kept adding and adding. And so eventually, I think it was maybe about 8 rings that I was wearing all at once. And during that time of making, I would wear necklaces as well, bracelets heavily adorned. I'm like, what a better way to represent you but to wear yourself. And so that's what started people to want to collect the works, but to take my rings. And so I can't believe that I've sold my own damn rings, but I'm missing 3 from my collection. And so the bigger rings are named after the people who have collected those works. And when it came time to have a solo show in Detroit, and it had been maybe like 4 years, this is what I thought of. I wanted to make one larger than life works, but I also wanted to make a statement. And so around that time, or still, I don't know really how big a deal it is, but a lot of Detroit artists or people who were claiming to be Detroit artists were not. And so they were just using, the location to amplify their careers. And so at the same time, galleries were doing that same damn thing to help validate, their showing of artists or who they represent and things like that. And so here it is. I haven't had an exhibition, a solo exhibition in Detroit it was like a 4-year gap. And so I had to go hard. And so the necklace is entitled, 39 Reasons Why I'm Not Playing. And so a lot of this is definitely a flex, of what I can do. And a lot of times because there's an underestimation for artist that looks like me who creates the work that I do. So it'll be plenty of times where I'll deliver a sculpture and the nearest white man, they'll ask, yo, that's a great sculpture, or they'll tell them, like, sweet, or how did you do this, or whatever, and they'll quickly say, no, that's not me, that's her. This is her work. And so once that happens, there comes tons of questions. One, where did I study and learn? You didn't ask that to the artist that you assumed was the creator just because he was white. But when it comes to me, I get a full gamut of how I even got the opportunity. And so a lot of times when I do present, I am trying to flex on everybody and including myself. just want people to be like wowed. You know, it's not every day that you see objects that are familiar to you at scales like this. And so just to amplify them off the body, it responds to the body in a different way. And so that's what I was looking for. You know, it's not the same individualized experience that you get with a ring or a necklace that's just intended for one person. This making the work not wearable, I'm able to house more people actually within the work, or they get to experience it in a different way that they probably wouldn't even investigate if it was at a smaller scale. You know, it's like one thing you can acknowledge craftsmanship at small scale, you can put on the work at a small scale, but like what happens when you definitely have a relationship to form or even seeing these objects before, but they're just amplified. And so then the room is mirrored, and it's mirrored so there's no separation of the work and the viewer. And so that relationship alone, you know, will probably accompany my work longer than I'm alive. I think it's an important aspect, especially depending on the subject matter, but I like how you can't take the person out. So actually, they are still wearing it. You know, they are very much so a part of every piece. I've been using mirrors since 2009, and the start of me using it was because I was talking about heavy political subject matters, and a lot of people wouldn't even want to critique the work. They don't want to talk about it. So it's like, okay, well, what the hell are you gonna do now your ass is up in it? There's no separation of that. And so that's what I love about the mirrors. Besides that they do like trippy shit to the room, right? Or they make it look bigger. It looks like it's way more jewelry in the space. And then you're trying to find your relationship to where you are in the space, because you can see it next to you, but then you see it also in yourself, and it's basically infinitied, you know? And so this jewelry box aspect was exhibited on a smaller scale in Memphis at the Metals Museum recently in July, and the mirrors, how they were assembled on the wall, looked more like surrealism. And so I like that too. Every time this installation is installed, there's so many aspects that can be so different. And so you're not, even though it may have some of the same works, it's totally different feel. I mean, I almost tripped on my own work because I could not tell where my relationship was looking into the mirror. And so it's really a refreshing way of seeing the piece. I think it would be really, really static if the walls were white. It would be a total different experience. And so the mirrors, they really amplify that aspect of someone being in my jewelry box. Jewelry boxes, when you see like the little generic kind with the ballerina inside, she's encased in mirrors. And so instead of having a fake generic ballerina, we all are the ballerinas. I see myself as an artist developer. I don't think I'll stop purchasing buildings. I am utilizing my art practice to purchase buildings that have not been accessible to the community, to try to turn them into spaces that are. And so basically, I guess I'm kind of like Robin Hood, flipping my own art practice to try to make sure that my community has what it needs. And so I think, you know, I was growing up on the west side of Detroit, and, you know, to just see like how a lot of development is coming in now, but to know that I have 30 plus years of experience in this area, and I haven't seen a lot of this, you know, a lot of these buildings activated, you know, even One of the buildings that I purchased, I've never seen it activated. I've heard stories about its former life, but it's been mostly abandoned. And so, you know, my community deserves good design. We deserve, you know, food, all kind of food if we want it. We deserve hot coffee if we want it, you know, or a co-working space to sit. And so when and I always go to places, no matter where I travel, I'm always thinking about what's lacking. It's like even here in Muskegon, I'm like, look, I'm gonna bring a Detroit Coney Island up here, and it's 24 hours. I'm gonna take everybody's money. But for my community alone, you know, I've started collecting or having another portfolio in 2017. And so what got me to purchasing real estate was the land grab, the articles that are coming out. There's nothing in Detroit. We have one major developer, Dan Gilbert, who's basically bought all of the downtown, you know, so he can do whatever he wants. It's all his property, right? And I remember going to a friend's Shabbat dinner, and I just happened to mention, like, you know, Dan Gilbert, he got all these buildings, whatever, didn't really like it. And so she's like, well, it's his buildings, and he can do whatever he wants. And so I was like, ooh, bitch, if that don't make sense, if that doesn't make sense, it's literally, I can talk my shit all day. I can say what I don't like all day. But if I'm not putting my money and my mouth on the same subject matter to try to attack what it is that I'm not liking, then I'm just talking like everybody else. There's no action piece. So I'm like, that made so much sense, even though I thought she was being smart with me, you know. But it actually inspired me to start buying buildings. And I'm not done. I'm very much so inspired by this developer, Dan Gilbert, and how much acreage and commercial space he has been able to acquire. And of course, he's not an artist doing all of this stuff. But if he was, what would the development look like? You know, if he was from the area, what would the development look like? Of course, you got to get these big money pieces because there's big money that's coming into the city all the time. They have a different lifestyle as well, but it's like you can still get that big money piece creating and developing something that people need every day. And so like that's the thing, is like that's why I feel like my neighborhoods aren't developed, is because they don't feel like they're important. They don't feel like having good food is important in this area. But then once all these white families started to move into my neighborhood, now, oh, we need to change how the roads look. We need to do this infrastructure piece. We need to change how the parking is. So once that starts, I already know the other piece is coming, you know? And so now that I have quite a bit of real estate that I can play with, is like putting the plan into motion. And so right now I'm thinking about opening up a cafe in this old bank that I purchased to try to just get some traffic to say, yo, like, I'm not going to create these things that you can't utilize in your own neighborhood. That's crazy. You don't have a place that you can go walk to coffee. You can't get a hot sandwich. There's no soup. There's literally nothing but a gas station and a liquor store. And it's prominent in a lot of areas that these are the only options, besides like maybe a diner. We have Coney Islands. That's basically what it is, like everybody out of Coney. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, I can't not look at what's outside of my studio or even how I'm interacting with the building to say that I'm just going to focus on what I'm doing inside. It just literally doesn't make any sense to me. So, yes, it's heavy art, you know, about to build a team to help alleviate some of the work that I have, but there is a lot of work with commercial buildings. And so I plan on really attacking this development in the next couple years to get these buildings open.